Okay, good morning YouTube. So this is kind of an unplanned video. I decided I was going to share my bird pattern. I've been using this for quite a few years. I designed it some time ago and I used to sell these little birds, and someday I know I started making felt things and I just decided I was going to give her the pattern. I decided I was going to put it on my blog, but when I started writing it on my blog I realised it's actually a little bit complicated and it would be better if I showed you. So if you go to my blog, the link will be in the description below. You'll find this pattern. If you print it A4 size, this is the size that I use. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to cut out your template pieces. Now if you're going to make the bird, there are two versions of the bird. There is a standing version that requires some wire to make some legs. There is a flying version that actually goes on fishing wire to be hung up, but you can actually make the standing version without any legs and sit it in a nest. It still looks just as cute. Okay, so as well as your pattern, you'll need wire if you're doing a standing bird. You'll need sharp scissors for cutting felt. You'll need an assorted pieces of coloured felt, the colours that you choose. I'm going for variations of pink today. I'm going to make a pink bird. You'll need sewing thread and needle. I don't have any pink threads left, so I'm just going to have to make do. And if you're using wire, some cutting and shaping tools. You're going to need some sewing pins for pinning your pattern to your felt, and some seed beads, and you're going to need some sort of pen to draw around your template on your felt. So I'm going to cut these out and come straight back. Okay, so this is all my pieces cut out, and I forgot to mention that you will also need some sort of stuffing. I use toy stuffing, but it's your preference as to what you like to stuff your felt makes with. I also forgot to mention, if you are making the bird with the wire legs, you're going to need a scrap of fabric the colour of your underbelly just to sort of fit in the middle. Just a scrap oval. You'll cut it to fit later, so just lay that aside. Okay, this is normally when I make the legs. I like to have the legs ready so that once I start sewing I don't need to stop. Now the wire I'm using is a little bit thin, so I'm going to double it up. You need a sort of medium thickness wire, and I haven't done this in a very long time, so bear with me if I seem like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so out of practice. I used to make hundreds of these birds, haven't made them in so long. So, oh dear me. Okay, so I normally start with a foot. This is, I think this wire is still a little bit on the thin side, but we'll see how we go, because I can always, sorry, that was my phone. Okay, I start by making a little V, and then go back down one of your V legs, like so. So you have this little V, and then up again, try and keep them the same length, and back down, and keep them tight in together. Now I like to go back to the first little V, just to make it a bit thicker. Try and keep them the same length. And then a back shorter little length like this. It's really hard to explain, so I hope you can see what I'm doing. Now, once you have this, see, I told you I was going to be fiddly. Once you have this sort of shape, you want to use your length of wire to secure it all together just by wrapping in between your shapes. It's just to keep it all together, really. And don't worry if it's starting to come apart a little bit, because you are going to twist the wires. And I like to just go around the middle a few times. If you're not somebody who's competent with wire, I would skip this and just make the flying bird or bird in a nest, because I do find this really time consuming. Now twist to make them more solid. Don't worry too much if the end isn't looking good, we can always snip that off later, because these do get covered in nail polish if you're making the legs, just to make them thicker and just to keep any sharp bits of wire concealed. Okay, I should have got my flat pliers, these ones are not ideal for this. So any part of the limbs that you make are going to end up twisted like this. It just gives strength. You can see any sort of places that you need to put your wire around again. And I'm going to twist the back one. Oh, so in my way. Now I'm somebody who has made hundreds of these, and I'm not exactly making a good job of making it look easy. It is something you will get the hang of, and who knows, you might even find an alternative way to make little feet that you prefer. Okay, so once I've got to that stage, wrap it around a couple of times. So I want to bring up my leg. I don't want to make them too long, quite like short legs. And we're going to fold it back down on itself and take it up again. This is just really to give some strength. This wire is really thin, so I think I'm going to have to make the legs separately. I really wish there was an easier way to show you this. So once you've got a reasonable thickness of wire here, just the same again, you're just going to twist. And I'm getting this really messy. You really want the twist to be tight right down at the base of the foot, so that it holds nice and tight. And I'm not making a good job of this. I'm going to get my other pliers. Flat pliers are best for twists. Okay. Twist all the way up the leg. All the way up. All the way up. Okay. See, I know it looks a little bit messy now, but trust me, it does get better. Just want to shape it a little bit. Make sure that it will stand. Then you want to trim down your toes a little touch, if like mine, twisting them has made them a little too long. Make sure you twist your edges back together. Oh dear, I shouldn't have filmed this the first time doing it again, I should have practiced again. So, there's one leg. And if, like me, your wire's too short, you just make another one exactly the same as this. Now, once you have your two legs, you'll basically make a little bridge between them and wrap the wire round and round to secure them, so you get like this shape. And that's the shape that you're going to sew underneath your bird. Now, I find that when I do that, sometimes the legs can tip forward or back. So once I add my other leg and I have this straight bit here, I like to make a sort of little semicircle of wire front and back. I should really have the other leg on like this, so when you sew it down there's more to sew. You can catch the front and the back. But just anytime you make anything with the wire, just secure all your joints by twisting the wire around itself. And don't worry if you didn't have enough wire like me, adding another leg is pretty easy. I'm just going to do this to show you. I'm going to twist this to this, just till I get back to that side. And then I can attach this. Wire is one of those things, you either are really good at it, or like me, you fumble a bit and it never works out quite how you expect it to. But if you just keep at it, and know that quite a lot of this will not be seen, and that is what your felt is for. except when you go to sew on, you'll cut a slit here and a slit here, like so, so that you can put it round your little leg and sew round it, and that's one little leg. And to tidy up these little legs, once they're all made, I like to cover them in a couple of coats of nail varnish, and it covers all the sort of little gaps, it keeps all the ends nice and neat, and it just looks fab. Okay, so I'm putting that aside. I'm going to show you how to construct this bird. Okay, you're going to start, I'm just going to move all this out of the way, there's so much fuzz lying on here. There we go. I'm going to start with your underbelly. You want your ink from your pen on the inside and one of the sides of the bird, and just make sure that your drawing lines are on the inside of the bird. And you're going to start by the corner of the tail meeting up with the corner of the bird tail. You're going to tie a knot on the end of your thread and hide your knot inside. And depending on which stitch you prefer to use when you sew with felt, I like to use a blanket stitch, and for some reason I have such knotty thread today. So you're just going to work your way along the edges. Now don't worry about all this over here not meeting up, just as you work, just bring your seams together, and you'll see you're going to get to the turn, the corner or whatever it's called, that I just manoeuvre my felt to meet, because when you let it go it will find its own shape. So this is how you're going to work all the way, just bringing your seams together. And it can be a little fiddly at first if you're not somebody that's used to sewing, but you soon get the hang of it. So, and you're going to just keep sewing until you come all the way to this top corner. I'll come back when I've done that. Okay, so once you have sewn that on, and see what I mean, once you let it go it lies perfectly. You're going to do the exact same with the other side, and you're going to start at the tail and work your way forward, and I'll come back when I've sewn on that piece. Okay, so once you've got those two bits sewn on, it should look pretty much like this. And I think I forgot to mention in the supply list that when you've sewn your bird, you're going to need some sort of stuffing. I use just regular toy stuffing, but you can use recycled stuffing, even fill it with dried rice. It's really up to you, whatever you prefer. Okay, so once you've got this bit like this is a good time to check that most things are meeting up. If you have any sort of slight differences, it's just due to the way you've cut it out. I would just sort of make them a bit more even. Doesn't really matter when it's all sewn together. So you're going to take your breast and head piece, and the best way to line this up is the line that is here is going to correspond to the dip in the breast piece. See, it's going to fit quite perfectly in there. And I'm going to take my lighter colour. As I said, I have no pink thread, so I'm having to use colours that kind of go. See? And I always start down here at the base of the breast, hide my knot in behind my felt, tuck my thread in, and I just do a kind of a simple over stitch along the bottom. All these stitches vary in names depending on which country you're from. In Scotland this would be a simple over stitch. I'm not quite sure what it would be if you're in America or Australia. The weather is so bad today. We had a storm all through the night. It's kind of been storming for the past few days, so excuse any noise in the background, it's the terrible weather. Okay, so once you get to the edge, you just go back to your blanket stitch, and you're going to sew up here all the way until you reach the point, and then I'll come back. Okay, so once you get up to the top, I like to take my thread off and start at the bottom again and do the other side. It just keeps everything where it's meant to go. If I try to judge where it went up here to come back down, I probably would get it wrong. So it's best to always start at your anchored point and work upwards. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back when we're on to the next step. Okay, when you get to the top, you're going to stitch a couple of stitches together just to keep that felt nice and secure. Because the felt gets really narrow at the very top, there's a good chance that it could be pulled apart. So you just want to stitch a couple of stitches to keep it really firmly connected, just to protect your piece of felt that's in here. Just going to put that in there. Okay, so sometimes when I get to this point, as you can see, things don't always match up. And this is a couple of reasons. Firstly, felt being a very stretchy kind of fabric, sometimes when you're stitching things up you could stretch the felt on one side. Sometimes when I've drawn round my pattern and cut it out, I've not been extremely careful, but that's a good thing about felt. You can pretty much line it up and fix it, because most likely you've stretched your thread at some point. Sorry, not your thread, your felt. So if you try and ignore that and try and sew that in later, you probably won't be able to. So this is a good time to just measure up the body, measure up the head, and just make sure everything meets. I mean, this doesn't always happen. I've not made one of these birds in ages, and once you get into the swing of making these birds, you'll find that you probably never have to do that again. It just comes from practice and being more consistent with how you sew and the way you hold the felt to stop it from stretching. So next we're going to start at the top of the head and we're going to work all the way down to the tail, but we're going to stop halfway and stuff the front of the bird. So I'm just going to take my felt pieces, start stitching. Hope that's not the calm before the storm kind of thing, where it goes very quiet and you think, oh, the storm's finally over, and then the next thing, a house blows by. Okay, so you get halfway and it's time to stuff. Okay, I use toy stuffing, and I just take little bits and I like to pull it all apart, because sometimes when it's kept in a bag it can bunch up, and you're going to go very carefully and stuff first the head of your bird. Now this is where you'll fix a lot of your mistakes. If you've stretched out your felt, stuffing will fix it, because you're basically slightly stretching the felt anyway. Now don't overstuff, because you don't want to put any strain on your stitches. You just want to feel like it's firm but not solid. Okay. And just sort of play it by ear. Push it into any little spaces. You'll feel yourself where you need to stuff. And it doesn't take a lot of stuffing. These birds are really quick, especially if you make them in a smaller size. And to make them in a smaller size is simple. You just print off the pattern at a different percentage. Well, the pattern right now is A4, so if you printed it off at shrunk it down to A5 size, you would have a bird half the size of this. And I've also made a huge bird by tripling and 4 timesing, I don't even know what 4 times are, quadrupling the size of the pattern. Okay, when you get to the stage where you've stuffed most of the bird, you can finish sewing up. And just make sure your tail ends meet. You don't want to get to the tail and have a completely wonky tail. There's a lot of room for error in this pattern though. If you did get to the tail and there were different lengths, you could always just trim some of the felt away. Oh dear, I hate when you get your thread to a certain length and it starts coming off the needle on you, because I'm not the best at threading needles. Okay, so when you get to the tail, I usually find that I'm running out of thread anyway, so I end my thread at the very end of the tail. Quite easy, just, and again, see? It's stuff like this that turns a 10-minute video into a 3-hour video, because you spend most of the time rethreading needles. So I'm just going to catch it in a couple of knots and then just hide it inside the bird so I can trim it there. Okay, when you've got to this stage, you're going to finish stuffing your little birdie, which is looking kind of adorable. Stuffing the little birdie with smaller amounts. Try not to stretch this opening, because this is his little tail. And you want to fill it sort of almost to the end, because however you finish this tail, you're going to need a little space. Now there's a few ways you can finish the tail. This way, the way I'm going to do it now, is just the plain normal way. I usually finish the tails, but in the past I've also used this opening to put pieces of fabric strip in or feathers before you sew it up, so that it has a big long tail. Okay, so you're going to sew this like this. Basically, you're going to take half of these two edges sewn down to the bottom and then sew up the middle. I am the worst person in the world for explaining things. I'm not a very good teacher, I'm afraid. I find it very hard to simplify and explain things. So sometimes watching me is better than listening to me, because I think I just confuse people. Okay, we've got to this stage and our little bird looks like this, and if you've got any little bits of stuffing sticking out, you can pull them off. Now at this point, this is where I would decide if it was going to be a standing bird or a flying bird or a nesting bird. So your little beak and your wings are still to go. It's pretty much positioning them wherever you think they look cute, and just try and get them sort of equal. And I find with the wings you can practice a little bit of embroidery. Sometimes it's nice to actually stitch little feather shapes as you go. Sometimes I double up the felt and have two wings that I'll stitch together all the way around first, and then only join them at the very top here so that they've still got a little bit of flap. I think I'm just going to sew these on normally for this video, and I'll come back and show you. Okay, so I've just sewn the wings on basic, and now we're going to do a little beak. Now the little beak is pretty straightforward. You're going to fold down a little triangle, and again, and you're just going to roll it till you get to the end. So you have this little cone, and then you're just going to stitch up the seam to secure it, and you're going to sew to the front of your little bird. So I'm going to do that. Okay, when you get back to the bottom, you're not going to cut your thread off. You're going to come out through the side where you want its eye to be. And I'm using seed beads. Oops. Seed beads for the eyes. You're just going to take a seed bead in and sort of the same place on the other side of the face. Try and get the same place anyway. So I'm just trying to find one that I'll go over. Okay, and I just like to go through a couple of times just to really secure those eyes. Especially if you're going to have, you know, if it's going to be in a place where a child will keep picking it up. I just like to make sure it's really secure. So once I've gone through a few times, to secure my thread, because you can't really knot anything, I just like to bring it in and out of the seams a few places so that it catches in the stuffing inside and anchors it. The more you do this, the more anchored inside it becomes, and then you can snip it off. I mean, especially when it's something decorative like this. Okay, so that's the main part of the bird. Now if you were just making the nesting bird, this is where you would stop, put it in a little nest, perfecto. But we're making ours with legs, so I'm going to finish the other foot and come back. Okay, so I finished my little legs here. They're not the neatest and they look like this, and this is when I paint them with nail polish. Now this does a couple of things. First, it will stop your wire from unraveling. It will hide the sort of imperfections of your wire, but it will also cover any sharp edges. So if this is on display and you pick it up, you will not stab yourself. I usually go over it with quite a liberal coat. It'll tend to pull in the areas that have gaps, and I'll let this fully dry and then I'll go back and give it another coat. Okay, now the nail varnish is dry. I'm just making sure my legs are the same length. Now don't worry too much about how they look right now, we adjust them after on the bird. So you want to figure out the best place that's going to hold the weight of your bird. Too far forward, the bird will tip forward. Too far back, well, the bird will tip back. How you want your bird to stand. I usually find that kind of around this area works best, but as it's wire, we can manipulate it afterwards. Okay, I'm going to get the thread. I have tried so many various ways of attaching these legs in the past, including glue, including stabbing sticks into the felt and gluing them in place, and I have found every time this method works best for me. Okay, so you don't need to worry about hiding any of your stitching or your knots, because we have this to cover it all up when we're done. So basically you're just going to go over the top of your wire all the way round and in the middle. Make sure your legs are kind of centered. Don't even need to do neat stitching. It's the best kind. And we're just going to anchor these legs onto your bird. all the way round. And if you do a good job, you don't even need any glue. And I keep catching its tail. Try not to cut your fingers off. Okay, so once you have done that, you're going to take your little bit of felt and you're going to have 2 slices. You're going to maneuver it around. Now this is where you see that it's a little bit too long at the front, so I'm just going to trim it down a little bit because I don't want it to come that high up my little bird's belly. And voila! I'm going to stitch it down. Now pull your legs in a little bit. Best place to start is right at the leg so you can join those 2 bits of felt. Stitch it up around it a little bit. Okay, and I just like to do a simple overstitch all the way round. Really? Me and thread, not my friend. Okay, in the same way we did with the seed beads, I'm just stitching to a few different seams to anchor my thread because of the wire underneath. And I'm going to give it a snip. Now, this is when you can manipulate his little feet and his little legs to make him stand a little better. And tip him a little bit. Oops, not too much. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice to get them standing right. There we go. You just have to keep maneuvering the wire and he will eventually stand. And that is your little bird from the pattern. And I would really love it if you make any of these little birds to send me a picture on my Facebook or my Instagram and let me see your bird. And while I'm here, I just want to show you this lovely little plaque. It just arrived halfway through making this video, and it's by Laser by Designs, I think they're called, on Facebook. I'll put a link in the description box. It's a photo prop, but in my case it's a video prop. Anytime I make a video, I'll hopefully have it sitting somewhere that people can see it, just so you don't forget my name and so nobody can steal my videos. Okay, so there's the little birdie, just pulling a bit of stuffing. Bye bye.